Election day looming. Who is in best position to advance in the Detroit mayor's race? Doctor's orders. What illnesses and diseases in Michigan have the state's top doc concerned? The discussion starts now on this August 3rd edition of Flashpoint. Happy Sunday, everybody. Good to have you with us. I'm Jason Colthorpe. The Detroit mayor's race will be whittled down to 2 candidates on Tuesday. Polling suggests of the 9 candidates, 4, maybe as many as 6, have a legit shot at making the general election. One of those candidates, Solomon Kinloch Jr., was at one point polling second. Then last week, his 1993 arrest for assault against his then wife resurfaced. Coincidental timing, to be sure. Mary Sheffield has pulled well ahead of the field, but has not been taking that for granted by blasting the airwaves recently with campaign ads. Does she have that spot locked up? If so, who's poised to nab the second spot? Is it Sontil Jenkins, James Craig? And what about the wild cards, Todd Perkins and Fred Durhal III? We've assembled a top-notch panel to discuss the mayor's race and more. So let's ask them right now on Flashpoint. Joining me at the round table this morning, marketing and communications strategist from the firm with his name on it, Mario Moro, journalist and executive director of Outlier Media, Orlando Bailey, the assistant editorial page editor at the Detroit News, Caitlin Buss, and the editorial page editor at the Detroit Free Press, Nancy Kaffer. Gang, good to have you with us this morning.
Thank you.
I mentioned a few moments ago the 1993 arrest of Solomon Kinloch, which just happened to pop up about a week and a half before the primary. Mario, I'll start with you. Do you think this moves the needle in any which way?
I think it actually helped him.
Really?
Because, you know, this is all about opposition and opposition research. You know, one of the other camps put it out there. It's obvious by way of Robert Davis, who I guess was dropping it off at every news outlet in America. But I think, you know, he came out, he came clean, he talked about it. The congregation knew about it. All his fellow, you know, the followers knew about it. But I think it improved because all the social media posts that I saw, most of them, not all, were in favor of like, wait, this was so many years ago. I mean, why are we talking about this? Talk about the issue. So I think it helped him in a way.
And part of his statement, Orlando, was just that I talk about this as a teaching moment with the congregation, but he also called it politricks. Would you agree with that term?
Well, no, you know, all is fair in a game of politics, and you're running for the mayor of the city of Detroit. And so if you didn't figure out how to message that before in your campaign, somebody's going to help you message that in your campaign by revealing that. You know, I think to Mario's point, there was a lot of support just from my scraping of social media, but also on my social media feed were former victims of domestic violence. And I think women in particular wanted to see him really acknowledge, come out, apologize, and move on, not blame it on politics, not blame it as a witch hunt for the journalists trying to go after him or attack him. It's a thing that happened. It's a truth that happened. Nobody lied. Face it, come out with it, and make sure you don't alienate certain people in your response.
Caitlin, agree?
I do think it maybe helped him. I think all things considered, he's run an impressive campaign for being, you know, not a politician. And so I give him credit for not backing away from it and for kind of somewhat owning it, although I do appreciate the sensitivity to people who've gone through something like that. But I think, you know, there's a redemptive message here, and it's worked for him. And so I don't think it'll have that much of a negative impact on him. I think the timing was more suspicious than probably helpful.
Sure.
Right. Yeah, a pastor in redemption.
Yeah, that did seem quite a little hinky, to use a word that nobody uses.
You know, I don't think that this is politricks. I mean, yes, of course, this came via an interesting route, but backgrounding candidates and letting voters know what they're about, what their track record is, good and bad, is part of our responsibility as journalists. So did this kind of, the gun get jumped here, the jump get gunned, whatever, yeah, sure. But this would have come out eventually. There's no way around that. This is a high-profile election for mayor of Detroit. I'd imagine that people who were firmly for Kinloch probably aren't swayed by this. People who weren't, were firmly for someone else, probably weren't swayed by this either. But there's still a lot of undecideds out there, I think.
Let me ask both of you. You guys each endorsed a different candidate this year. Nancy, let me start with you. The Freep endorsed Mary Sheffield. Why?
We got a chance to spend time with the top 6 candidates. They were all great conversations. I think we're really lucky to have a number of highly qualified people seeking this office this time around. This was a really tough choice. We had, again, there's several people in the race who I think would be fantastic as mayor. But Mary Sheffield really stood out to us. Her experience is very obviously relevant and fresh. She's council president. She does the work in connecting with the community. She has advanced. She's shown ability to advance ordinances and policies that are really good and strong for people, but also understanding that business drives Detroit and that the business community can't be just cut off. So we thought she had the right balance. She has the energy. She has the focus. She's a fresh new generation of leadership, and that's why we chose her.
Caitlin, was it tough to choose Sontiel Jenkins, which is who the News endorsed?
It was tough, like Nancy said, and we keep trying to find things we firmly disagree on, but it's a really great pool of people. And so we enjoyed spending time with all of them. We had a hard time coming to a decision, but we thought that her executive background combined with her legislative experience and kind of her lived experiences in Detroit qualified her pretty well for this position. We also liked her master plan for the neighborhoods and several of her other proposals. She takes homelessness very seriously, which was a big part of all our conversations. So we went with her.
Let me ask the gentleman, do endorsements matter? These weren't the only two, obviously. There were several this cycle.
Well, no offense, first of all, but I don't think that they matter as much as they used to. When people really read the papers and really followed the endorsement process. So we have the Detroit News endorsing one candidate. We have the Free Press endorsing another candidate. We have the Michigan Chronicle endorsing 2 candidates, pretty much. We have the UAW endorsing another candidate. The Black Slate endorsing another candidate. So they're all over the place. I don't believe anybody's going to get up Tuesday morning or before they open up their absentee ballot and say, oh, who did the news agencies endorse? No, that's not the way it works. But it helps with the candidates because the candidates can use this endorsement and flood the airwaves, whether it's social media, or whether it's a commercial, or whatever the case may be, and say, hey, look, I just got another endorsement. And that's what is helping them.
Geez, Mario, tough room. The former editorial page editor of the Free Press, Joe Stroud, who was the page editor there for a long time, used to say, Free Press endorsement is good for 10% of the vote, either way, which is not true anymore, right? We know that. We know that we're very polarized, we're very set in our ways. We don't have that kind of push-pull anymore. But what a good endorsement does isn't just say, you should vote for Mary Sheffield. It explains why we think you should vote for Mary Sheffield. It examines her track record in a way that the average person doesn't necessarily have time to do or inclination to do, isn't familiar with the systems of government and policy, can't really evaluate effectiveness. And again, because they have a different job and they're doing that full time, and this is what we do full time. And we're able to, in an endorsement, we explain our decision in a way that even if you don't agree with us, you should be able to walk away saying, well, I understand this and I don't agree with them, but I've refined my own opinion a little bit. Because they've demonstrated how they went through their decision-making process. And I will say, I start getting texts from folks as soon as absentees go out saying, who am I voting for?
All the time.
So, and our page view traffic does suggest that endorsements are some of the most popular opinion content. And so, again, we're not in the old days of being able to, completely turn something around. But I believe they matter.
But in the older days, you probably would have done a lot more vetting too, because if this whole Solomon Kinloch thing went out, and you mentioned that there should be, these types of things should come out, they have to come out. But has the media really done their research on all the candidates? Because I know that there's stuff out there on everybody who's running, and it hasn't come out.
Yeah.
They're being selective about what is printed and what is voiced for the people to hear.
Call me later.
And there still could be more to come out.
There still could be more.
I mean,
because we're only in the primary, and I think the general will see a lot more stuff come out. But I think, endorsements I think I draw the line where we have an electorate and then we have folks who are registered to vote, right? And our electorate, the folks who are coming out to elections, is much smaller than the overall number of people registered to vote. And I think the electorate pays attention to stuff like endorsements from the Free Press and endorsements from the Detroit News, because these people are a bit more engaged. They're trying to figure out who they want to vote for. They're trying to figure out where these candidates stands on issues. As a journal, I'm always thinking about who the papers have endorsed. And I think this one, this go round, it's pretty historical. I don't know if the papers of record have endorsed women for this position before, right? I'm not certain. I'm asking, but I think it's a pretty historical update here.
Well, because it's such a small number, like you say, it means it could go any which way. Any little bit could move the needle. So before I end this segment, quick answer from everybody.
Yeah.
Who's the, I guess, the lesser talked about candidate that might defy the odds that would surprise you, Mario?
Wow, that's a very good question. Who I think probably Todd Perkins would probably get some votes out there.
I don't underestimate Fred Durhall.
Kayla?
I'm going to go with Todd Perkins, although I agree a bit on Durhall.
Yeah, Durhall. He's got such a well-known name, and he's such a great elected public servant, elected official.
And he's running a good campaign too.
Yeah.
Well,
he is.
Let's discuss it all again when we're down to 2. All right. Yeah. Stay with us. We're going to come right back and hit some more topics with our roundtable. This is Flashpoint. Back here on Flashpoint with our roundtable. Let's dive into the Senate race real quick. Caitlin, let me start with you. Thoughts on Bill Huizenga not running after a meeting with Donald Trump? Does this mean the road is wide open for Mike Rogers, and this has got to help in a lot of ways for fundraising too?
Yeah, this was an interesting one. Huizenga was, I know, very interested in running. And so this is a group effort here. I think to have him not run his fundraising was, I think, better than Rogers slightly. He could have put up a really formidable challenge, in my opinion, in the primary. So I think the fact that he decided not to is, a win for Republicans probably. It puts more steam in Rogers' basket. And he lost to Slotkin, so he has a bit of an uphill battle here. He's not going to have Trump on the ticket next time. I think there's a lot of coalescing that needs to happen behind him, and he's putting in a good effort. He's got people in every county, but I think his fundraising needs to tick up for him to be a really serious contender. But all things considered, it's good for Republicans that they are seemingly coming behind one person. Although Huizenga is a great public servant and would have done a good job in that role.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised to see that. But Nancy, if people were paying close attention, the president was not able to get John James not to run for governor, which he's made clear he did want. He did want him to stay in Congress. So this time he wasn't leaving anything to chance, it appears.
Sure. And I think there's 2 different ways to do this, obviously. There's widow the field out early, put everything behind one person, or there's have a really healthy, robust primary and let everybody air their grievances. And the one that works is the one that works. Yeah. I mean, the job is to win, and we'll know next year if this was a great strategy or a poor one.
Also see if Huizenga stays in the congressional race, which now he seems a little to be wavering. Mario, let me jump to the gubernatorial race real quick. Michigan reporting this week, Mike Duggan actually raising the eyebrows by raising the most money of direct donations by all of the candidates. What does that tell you about this race?
That tells me that, don't count Mike Duggan out, even if he's running as an independent. The guy raised $3.2 million, 93% of which came from Michiganders. And I think he waited to the last minute for everyone else to put their numbers out there, because Benson said, hey, I raised 3.5. Wait a minute, you moved 1.1 transferred from your personal campaign fund.
Your Secretary of
State fund. So, she goes at 2.2, but Mike Duggan did an impressive thing. He didn't have the established parties behind him, the Republican or Democrats, and he had independents, and everyone else put that money behind him. I'm not going to count the guy out.
Yeah. Orlando, what surprises you more about that, at least the fundraising, that Eric Nesbitt was able to keep pace with John James, or that Lieutenant Governor Gilchrist seems to be far behind the Democratic field?
Lieutenant Governor Gilchrist is far behind in terms of fundraising, and I don't think he would be in a better, more positioned role to fundraise for his candidacy than as a sitting lieutenant governor. So I don't know what the mismatch is there. Nesbitt and James, I really want to see the 2 of them duke it out and see how that goes.
I would think that Gilchrist had to be disappointed, especially after Mackinac, where he had some prime moments getting kind of the spotlight all to himself, Caitlin.
Yeah, I don't think he's capitalized on his role. I mean, he's served as Whitmer's, done the dirty work for her here and there, but he hasn't had a really great public presence. And I think he's, we're seeing that in his campaign right now. On Eric and John James, Eric is out there, and if you're among, the people that they're courting, he's shaking everyone's hand and he's talking to them. And the criticism we hear about James is that he's just not doing that. And so I think we're starting to see a reflection of that. Again, could be easily course corrected, and they probably will duke it out at some point. But Eric does a good job getting out there.
And Nancy, we have so much time left, although it does seem like the ground games are in full effect for some of the candidates, but others, like you just mentioned, John James, seems to be waiting till we get closer to the finish line here.
Yeah, and again, like, is it smart to make a big splash now or to wait till next year? We'll know next year. But for Mike Duggan, he has huge name recognition in Metro Detroit. I think still, again, polling, it's so early, it's hard to say this is put too much weight on it, but Richard Schuba of Glengarriff Group, as you know, did something in May. Duggan had like 86% name recognition in Metro Detroit, and then outstate it was like 9%. It tanks. He needs to get people in the rest of the state to know who he is and to think that he can do the job, and money will definitely help with that. He's got billboards up north, up north. America's most effective mayor is the slogan. But it, I mean, in Schuba's poll, in head-to-head matchups, Duggan lost all of them against with Nesbitt and Gilchrist, James and Benson, whatever the matchup was, he was coming in third. So he's got a lot of work to do. And
we've got a lot of time to see how it shakes out. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. Always a
for
pleasure. We're coming right back to finish this episode of Flashpoint. Stay with us. Back here on Flashpoint with Dr. Natasha Bagdasarian, the Chief Medical Executive for the state of Michigan. Great to see you again. We recently covered all the changes happening at the federal level. Health and Human Services Director Robert F. Kennedy making changes as he kind of settles into that role there. What have you seen at that level that you like, you don't like, or has you just concerned?
There are a lot of things happening at the federal level, and I think it's really important for Michigan residents to know how these changes impact them.
Right.
And now, of course, we really want to make America healthy again, but we do have to really understand what these changes mean in the real world. So a couple of things we're seeing and that we have been closely tracking. Number one, of course, we are expecting cuts to things like Medicaid, which means that a lot of people could lose health insurance in the upcoming months to years. That's one of the things that we're following very closely. The other thing that we're seeing is a change in the way that public health is funded, a change in the way that different programs and projects are funded, things like HIV prevention, tuberculosis prevention, and of course vaccines. And as we're seeing some of these changes in funding, we're also seeing a change in guidance. And I think that's leaving a lot of people confused.
I'm glad you brought up vaccines because we've talked a little bit about this, and correct me if I'm wrong, but there's a committee of, I want to say 17 people that decide which vaccines are necessary, and if they're in full agreement, that's how we know which ones are free when we get our kids vaccinated for measles, chickenpox, et cetera, et cetera. And that committee has been replaced at the federal level, and if they don't agree on these, does that mean families could have to start paying for these?
Well, this is a really great question. This committee, it's called the ACIP, or the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices. They have, as you mentioned, been reconstituted with a lot of people who maybe are more skeptical of vaccines. Now, we always want to question the evidence, but we can't start from a place where we are questioning science or not believing the results of data. And the data shows that vaccines remain safe and effective. The data has not changed. But what has changed is some of the ways that this advisory commission is acting at the federal level. Usually in June or July, this commission will meet and take a vote on flu and COVID vaccines so that decisions can be made for the fall. Now, the group met. They did not address COVID and flu vaccines. They did not take those normal votes. And then we saw some language changes from the CDC that made it a little bit more confusing for people to understand which vaccines were recommended for the fall. Now, why this matters to us, why this committee matters to us, the ACIP, is because healthcare insurance coverage is tied to the recommendations of this committee. So Medicaid coverage is tied to this committee. We've got a program called Vaccines for Children, again, tied to this committee. And then, of course, we've got requirements for private insurers like Blue Cross Blue Shield, again, references this committee. So if they either don't take a vote or if they change their guidance, it could have implications for people.
Which if I'm understanding it correctly, poorer families could have trouble getting their kids or families vaccinated because of that. Is that correct?
It absolutely could. So we know that for private insurers like Blue Cross Blue Shield, they have told us they remain committed to offering vaccines. And so it's likely that people who have private insurance will be able to continue to get vaccines. But for people who rely on Medicaid, for people who rely on the Vaccines for Children program, this could mean that vaccines are no longer covered. And when we talk about vaccines, it's really important that the vast majority of people are vaccinated so that we don't see resurgences of infectious diseases. And that means covering people who can afford the vaccines and people who can't afford vaccines as well.
And we have seen, which I'm sure I've asked you before, about the concerns about measles outbreaks, which are still there. We even have some in Michigan right now.
We do. So we have seen measles outbreaks all over the country. This is the worst year for measles since 1992. We've had outbreaks here in Michigan that have been much smaller than the outbreak in Texas, for example, or the outbreak in Ontario. But that is not just because of a coincidence. This is not just good luck. It has actually taken hundreds of staffing hours of people going and doing what we call contact tracing to make sure these outbreaks of 3 or 4 cases don't turn into outbreaks of 300 or 400 cases.
Is the advice, hey, before school, it's always a great time, make sure your kids get vaccinated? Is that the advice? Make sure you do it right now if you don't normally do it?
That is absolutely the advice. So again, the vaccine landscape is changing, especially as it comes to coverage potentially in the upcoming months. We don't know if that happens, there could be some changes. And so right now, what I can tell you is these vaccines are still widely available. They're available at places like pharmacies, local health departments, your primary care provider's office, and they are still covered by both private insurance, Medicaid, and the Vaccine for Children program. So this is a really good time to get those vaccines before kids go back to school.
I have 25 seconds. How concerned are we with mosquito-borne illnesses this season?
Mosquito-borne illnesses, tick-borne illnesses,
Ticks,
all of these things are, again, something that we are really paying attention to as our summers become more steamy. One of the things that we're really concerned about is this big increase we've seen in Lyme disease. We've actually seen more cases over the last few years. The distribution has spread around the state. In fact, 20 years ago when I trained, there was no Lyme disease in Michigan, and we're now seeing cases in almost every county. We're also seeing cases earlier in the season and later in the season because of our warm weather. And so it's a really good idea to wear those long sleeves, long pants, and use insect repellents.
Easier said than done sometimes, but we always appreciate your perspective and the medical advice. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me on.
Always. That's going to do it for Flashpoint this week. Thanks for joining us. If you have any thoughts on the show, email us. It's always open at flashpoint@clickondetroit.com. I'm Jason Colthorpe. We'll see you later.